Friday. It is time once again for Mystery Unsolved. You know my name, and you know the game. We're uncovering, trying to solve the latest mystery that I have. Tonight's mystery, before I get to what tonight's mystery actually is, for those who don't know, we've dealt with the disappearances of planes and ships and boats. But tonight we have a very special vehicle, a blimp of all things. Tonight's episode of Mystery Unsolved is the disappearance of the Goodyear Blimp L8. Now, it's one thing for a plane to go missing. It's another thing for a ship to go missing. But a blimp, crazy. Absolutely crazy. But that's why we're here. So without further ado, Mystery Unsolved, the disappearance of the Goodyear Blimp L8. I should be good. It should be good to go here. All right. The L8, later renamed America and popularly known as the Ghost Blimp, was a United States Navy L-class airship whose crew disappeared off the Pacific Ocean on August 16th, 1942. They have a nice picture of it. I'll try to put the picture up afterwards, but you know how when I usually zoom in on pictures, they suck, but I'll do my best. At 11:15 a.m., several hours after the airship lifted off from Treasure Island, San Francisco, California. There really is a place called Treasure Island? L8 reappeared off the shore of Ocean Beach near Fort Funston. L8, try not to say LA. L8 briefly made contact with the ground at Ocean Beach, causing damage to the airship, then drifted over San Francisco and crashed on Bellevue Avenue, Daly City. No traces of its crewmen, Lieutenant Ernest DeWitt, Cody and Ensign Charles Adams, have ever been found. So that's just the opening paragraph. So you might hear me repeat that, but it might be in different wording. But that's just the general blurb. Let's see if I can zoom in on the picture. Give you a little this. I know it's not good, but I just want to see it. So it went missing over 80 years ago. All right. Do we want to know the background? I'll do a general basic, okay? Basic rundown. Well, maybe we aren't good. Jinxing myself. Nope. It's because I'm live. I was literally fine for an hour. I can't even talk. The L-class was a series of non-rigid airships, blimps, produced for the United States Navy in 1937, based on the small commercial airships produced by Goodyear Air Company that were used for advertising Goodyear tires. There you go. There's the connection. After the United States declared war on Japan in response to Pearl Harbor, the Imperial Japanese sank at least half a dozen aligned ships off the west coast over a period of several months. By August 1942, the Japanese had bombed Elwood oil field in California and Fort Stevens in Oregon. Heightened fears of an invasion had also prompted the Battle of Los Angeles, in which a false alarm was raised over what later was determined to be a weather balloon. Oh boy. The old weather balloons. Except this might have actually been a weather balloon. Although anytime a weather balloon comes up, you really question whether or not it actually is. One of the responses by the Navy included a takeover of Goodyear's 5 airship fleet, operating them out of the Navy's 2 major lighter-than-air air bases, Lakehurst, New Jersey, and Moffett Field in California. These Goodyear blimps were incorporated in an L-class with designations L4 through L8. While they were too small for any expensive operational use, The blimps were considered ideal for training missions in coastal anti-submarine patrols. You see, call me crazy. Maybe I live in a nutshell. I mean, maybe I live in a shell or a cave. I didn't know that the military used blimps. Am I the only person that didn't know this? If I'm blowing your mind right now, then good. I don't feel like an idiot. Sources differ to whether L8 had been named Rainbow or Ranger prior to its Navy service. 7 months prior to the incident in April 1942, L8 delivered vital B-25 modification parts to the aircraft carrier the USS Hornet after she departed California carrying the Doolittle Raiders ahead of their assault on Tokyo. Okay, so first and foremost, it's not the Hindenburg. That was like, I think it's a maiden voyage, like the Titanic. Boom. But the the Goodyear L8 blimp did its business before it belonged to the Navy. Probably did some things for the Navy, and then it just mysteriously disappeared. So this blimp had prior um, missions, which is good. It's good to know that this blimp wasn't like the Hindenburg or the Titanic on her maiden voyage. That usually follows. It was never to be seen or heard from again, or went down in the abyss of the Pacific, the Atlantic. Nobody knows why. All right, let's get to the good stuff, shall we? At 6:03 a.m. on August 16, 1942, L8 had been assigned to the Airship Patrol Squadron 32, lifted off from Treasure Island on a coastal anti-submarine patrol. Its scheduled route would have taken the airship over the Farallon Islands of Port Reyes and locally of the Montera before circling back to the Golden Gate Bridge. Ooh, Golden Gate Bridge mention. Inside the gondola were Lieutenant Ernest DeWitt Cody, age 27, and his co-pilot, Ensign Charles Adams, age 35. It was Adams' first flight as a commissioned officer. Oh, that sucks for him. It was his maiden voyage. L8 was armed with 2 depth charges and one .30 caliber machine gun. This is a blimp, and it's got a machine gun on it. Again, I just learned something new today. Blimps carry machine guns at some point. I mean, yes, it's a military blimp, but it's a blimp. You see what I mean? Like, what if you accidentally shot it and did I just uncover something? I don't know. We'll circle back. Although it can't be that simple, right? At the time of the incident, the airship had made 1,092 previous trips without incident and had recently been inspected. Conditions on the morning of the flight were clear. Okay. Holy crap. So I literally just said it wasn't the ship's maiden voyage. It wasn't its first trip. In fact, it had made 1,092 previous trips. That is like, dear God. Wow, that's a lot of trips. At 7:38 a.m., L8's crew radioed to Treasure Island. Hold on. Without incident. It had been inspected on the morning of the flight. So, all systems go. That's usually how it goes. The crew radioed to Treasure Island and reported observing an oil slick 4 miles off the coast of the Farallon Islands. A Liberty ship and a fishing boat in the area both witnessed L8 descending to within 30 feet of the ocean's surface, encircling the oil slick. Again, this is a blimp. It kind of sucks when you don't if you've never been on a blimp or you don't really. I can't be the only person here that's like confused by this. I guess I when I see blimps in the air, I just think they serve one purpose, to carry those signs. That's, to me, that's what a blimp is. So to have a purpose for anything other than carrying a sign, to me, is just amazing. Like the fact that a blimp can descend and they're just like, let's look at the oil slick. I'm like, okay. This would constitute the last confirmed sighting of the airship with the crew aboard. Controllers at Treasure Island lost contact with the crew at 8:50 a.m. So that's about a little over an hour after. Shortly after 9 a.m., LA dumped ballast, ascended, and headed east contrary to its intended course toward Point Reyes, which was to the northwest. What is ballast? I literally just did this for my book. Guns? Ballast? No, isn't that gold? They dumped something important, right? At 11:15 a.m., the L8 reappeared. Okay, so shortly after 9 a.m., they dumped ballast and they ascended and headed east, contrary to what its reported course was towards Port Reyes. So that was kind of like the last 9 a.m. was like the last time people saw it. And then for 2 hours, so like, wherever they were supposed to go, nobody didn't see them. But at 11:15 a.m., L8 reappeared off the coast of the ocean beach and drifted towards the coastline at low elevation. The airship touched down on the beach, where two surf fishermen tried to hold it down by its tie lines. Upon looking inside the gondola, the fishermen observed that no crew were inside. As the fishermen were unable to hold the ship down any longer, it rose briefly into the air before running into a sloping cliff, causing damage to its starboard propeller and dislodging one depth charge, relieving it of enough weight to gain altitude. An automatic valve inside LA was opened and began releasing helium gas, causing the airship to take a sagging, V-shaped appearance as it deflated. LA drifted inland over the Olympic Club golf course in Mission Street. Ha! Attracting the attention of a large crowd of onlookers who followed its journey. Um, this reminds me of that scene in Goodfellas. Was it Goodfellas? Goodfellas of no casino, where they're on they're on the golf course, and the FBI is like in a helicopter above them, been watching them all day, and because they've been watching them all day, the helicopter actually runs out of fuel and it lands on the golf course, and you see two guys in suits get out of the helicopter and they go running into the woods. That reminded me of that. Floating over San Francisco's Crocker and Amazon neighborhood, the airship lost elevation and began scraping telephone poles and residential houses. L8 finally crashed in the front of a house at 419 Bellevue Avenue in Daly City. Imagine living in that house, watching TV. Well, it's the 40s, so they're not watching TV. So they're around their old radio, and all of a sudden they look at the window and all you just see is just this. The hell was that? Was that and then this just lands on their house. Police and military personnel immediately descended upon the crash site. While the gondola doors were found hanging open, the crash had been so gentle that the crewmen would have walked away unharmed. Neither Cody nor Adams were found inside. Searches of the coastline from air, land, and sea found no trace of the missing pilots, and the search was abandoned on August 18th. Authorities initially theorized that Cody and Adams had bailed out of LA over the ocean, but all three parachutes and a rubber life raft were found aboard the gondola. Furthermore, the airship's radio and engines were switched on, and no distress transmission had been sent, indicating that the crewman's disappearance had been abrupt. So, how many of these episodes have I done where there's been a ship or a plane, and the obvious evidence of like um, lifeboats, radios, or just any evidence of like foul play, but there's nothing there. Or there's like a little bit of evidence that's missing, but it doesn't really make sense. Like oh, let's say like the radio's off. Why would they turn their radio off? But look, the rafts are still there, and look, oh the gear that they needed, it's still here. Like there's been a few cases I've done now with ships and planes where evidence, some evidence is missing, but some of it isn't. It's still intact, and it doesn't make sense because it doesn't connect to the people. Like where are they? Like they need this gear. They need the evidence. Same thing. A board of investigation convened by the Navy could not only determine that LA had not been shot down, burned, or made contact with the ocean. Let me read that again. A board of investigation convened by the Navy could not only could only determine that Elliot had not been shot down, burned, or made contact with the ocean, and that Cody and Adams had not engaged in misconduct. Cody and Adams were declared illegally dead in 1943. But it happened in 1942. Don't you have to wait? Don't you have to wait for someone? If someone's missing, don't you have to wait 7 years for them to be declared legally dead? Or was that not the case in the 40s? I don't know. The official theory was in order to deploy a smoke barrier at the site of the oil slick. One crew member had opened the rear hatch of the gondola. He then slipped out and, dangling from the hatch, shouted for assistance. When the other crew member attempted rescue, they both fell. Oh, this is the theory. The sudden loss of weight would have caused the derelict airship to rapidly gain altitude. Outside of the official circles, various scenarios were immediately put forward attempting to explain Cody's and Adams' disappearances and the circumstances of Elliot's mysterious flight. This included speculation that the crewmen had either been captured or defected to Japan, that their disappearance was the result of a desertion scheme gone awry, wow, or other more outlandish scenarios. I would like to hear those outlandish scenarios. Okay. Normally, I say something and then, sure enough, I read it. I didn't do that this time. In my head, I thought my first theory, my first thought was because remember, I read the beginning, the blurb, and it said that they had conflicts with Japan before, during Pearl Harbor. So my thought was that maybe they got kidnapped by Japanese soldiers. That seems like the most obvious theory. Now, Japan, they can be pretty ruthless, they can be pretty hostile, but maybe in this scenario, they were just like, you quietly get out of your blimp, and there will be no harm done to you or your ship. And the guys were like, okay. And they got out of the blimp, they were taken prisoner, and they were never heard from again. Case closed. Right? No. We wouldn't be here if that was that simple. But that is a good thought. That's my number one theory. That's what I think happened to them. I'm not going to go back and forth. I'm not going to beat a dead horse here. That's my number one theory I'm going with. They were kidnapped by Japanese soldiers or military or what have you. Japanese. Maybe they defected to Japan? I don't really get that. I think we need context on the three men before we can determine whether or not they would desert to Japan. Were they not loyal to America? Like we don't, I don't know. L8 aftermath. L8 was quickly repaired and returned to service following the incident. Because remember, the ship did come back, just there was nobody on it. After the war, the airship was sold back to the Goodyear Company and renamed America, flying over sporting events as part of a Goodyear Blimp's fleet until it was retired in 1982. Wow, it's 40 years. Its gondola was then repainted back to its L8 markings and given to the National Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, Florida, where it sits on static display. Okay, but we still have no idea what happened to the people on it. So that's a good thing. Like the ship was actually repaired and now it's in a museum. That's kind of cool. We just have no idea what happened to the 3 people on it 80 years ago. All right. Do we have any other theories besides they were kidnapped by Japanese soldiers or military, or they defected to Japan? Okay, maybe. My first thought, I don't know if it's the simple. Maybe they fell out of the blimp, and maybe they drowned. Maybe they were eaten. Well, maybe they were eaten by sharks. Hey, it's not the craziest idea in the world. I don't know if sharks are native to the Pacific Ocean. I'm sure they are. Uh, did watching Shark Week do nothing for me last week? Apparently not. Apparently I learned nothing. Well, I didn't learn what sharks were, where they're native to. Anyway, it's totally possible that they fell out of the blimp. We don't, do they, maybe they, we don't know. Maybe they weren't good swimmers and they drowned. Maybe a shark ate them. Uh, this one's kind of dumb, but it kind of gets thrown around in a lot of disappearance cases. If you've watched my episodes, maybe they quietly got off the blimp, descended into the water, swam to another island in another place, and assumed new identities to start new lives. The starting a new life always seems to be a theory. It's not mentioned here, which is kind of ironic since I'm actually mentioning it. I usually never bring up they're starting new lives. I never do that because the articles usually do it for me, but I'm bringing it up. Maybe they started new lives. Because remember, the blimp wasn't shot down, it wasn't burned. And the weird thing is, after they, when, when all 3 men weren't in the blimp, it actually went off to the coast, was scraping a beach, and it's been repaired, and now it's in a museum. All right, I'm going to break down all the possible scenarios. We'll not break them down, but I'm just going to put them in order as the most likely, and then we'll wrap this up. Number 1, what I think happened, they were kidnapped by the Japanese. Makes too much sense not to be true. The Japanese, they're quiet people. They could have quietly kidnapped 3 people on an American blimp. Not the craziest thought in the world. 2, maybe the 3 American people, maybe they defected to Japan. 3, I don't like it, but again, maybe they fell into the ocean and they drowned or were eaten by sharks. 4, they intentionally went out of the blimp so that they could ride off into the sunset and assume new lives. I'm not going to ask because I'm yet to see feedback, so I'm not even going to ask. But this has been a very interesting episode of Mystery Unsolved. I will give myself that. A disappearing blimp. We've now covered disappearing planes, ships, and now blimps. What's next? I'll tell you what's next. Do stay tuned for the next episode of Mystery Unsolved next Friday, where I will be discussing the disappearance of Frederick Valentich. Who is that? No clue, but find out next Friday. For Mystery Unsolved, I am Justin Bienvenue. Until next time.